Greetings to everyone. Portion for today's reading is from Exodus 4 to 6. In Exodus 4, Moses responds to God's call with hesitation and doubt. He questions what will happen if the people do not believe him. So God gives him miraculous signs. His staff turns into a serpent, his hand becomes leprous and is healed, and water from the Nile turns into blood. Despite these assurances, Moses continues to resist, claiming he is not eloquent. God reminds him that he is the creator of the mouth and promises to help him speak. Still reluctant, Moses asks God to send someone else, which angers God. However, God appoints Aaron, Moses' brother, as his spokesperson. Moses returns to Egypt with his family, carrying the staff of God. On the journey, there is a serious moment where God confronts Moses regarding covenant obedience, and Zipporah intervenes. Moses and Aaron meet the elders of Israel and perform the signs. The people believe and worship God upon hearing that He has seen their suffering. This chapter exposes the inner struggle between divine calling and human insecurity. Moses' repeated excuse shows that fear often disguises itself as humility. God does not deny Moses' weakness, but redirects his focus from self to divine sufficiency. The sign given to Moses revealed that God uses ordinary things to demonstrate extraordinary power. The staff, a symbol of daily life, becoming an instrument of divine authority when surrendered. Moses' resistance show that calling is not always embraced easily. It often confronts our comfort zone. God's anger reveals that prolonged hesitation can become disobedience. The appointment of Aaron shows that God may provide support, but he does not lower his standard or cancel his call. The incident on the journey highlights that private obedience is essential for public ministry. God is concerned not only with what we do publicly, but how we live privately. The people's response show that faith can be awakened and God's work is revealed. Many believers today struggle with the same hesitation as Moses. We often feel unqualified, inadequate, or afraid to step into what God has called us to do. Yet, God is not looking for perfection, He is looking for availability. Our excuses may seem reasonable, but they can delay divine purpose. God has already placed something in our hand, but we fail to recognize its potential when surrendered to Him. Often, we focus more on our limitations than on God's power. Like Moses, we may desire confirmation again and again, yet still resist. God may allow support systems in our lives, but He expects us to move forward. Another important lesson is that ministry without personal obedience lacks foundation. Hidden disobedience can hinder visible calling. When we finally respond in obedience, it not only impacts us but also encourages others. God does not call the capable, He makes capable those who respond. In Exodus 5, Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh and deliver God's command, "Let my people go." Pharaoh rejects the request and questions the authority of God. Instead of releasing the Israelites, he increased their workload by removing the supply of straw for brick making while maintaining the same production quota. The Israelites are forced to gather straws themselves, leading to greater suffering. Their leaders are beaten when they fail to meet the demands. The people become discouraged and turn against Moses and Aaron, blaming them for worsening their situation. Moses, in turn, questions God about why he has allowed this trouble. He expresses confusion that despite obedience, the situation has become worse than even better. This chapter reveals the painful reality that obedience does not always produce immediate results. In fact, sometimes obedience intensifies opposition. Pharaoh represents resistance to God's will, and his reaction shows that spiritual breakthrough is often preceded by confrontation. The increased burden symbolizes how the enemy tightens control before losing it. The discouragement of the people show how quickly faith can collapse under pressure. Moses' complaint reveals that even God's servant struggle with doubt when expectations are not met. This chapter teaches that faith must go beyond visible outcomes. God is working even when nothing appears to change. Delay is not denial, it is part of divine timing. God allows tensions to build before release. True faith is not measured by comfort but by endurance. In modern life, many people assume that obedience will automatically lead to ease and success, but this chapter challenges that idea. Sometimes doing what is right brings temporary hardship. When things get worse, it is easy to question God's plan. Like the Israelites, people may blame those who are trying to lead them spiritually. Discouragement can cloud our ability to see God's bigger picture. We often expect quick results, but God works through process. When prayers seem unanswered, faith is deeply tested. The real question is whether we can trust God even when circumstances contradict His promise. This chapter calls us to remain steady even when results are not immediate. Faith is not proven when things improve, but when you remain when they don't. In Exodus 6, God responds to Moses' complaint by reaffirming his identity and promise. He declares, I am the Lord, and reminds Moses of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God promises to bring the Israelites out of Egypt, deliver them from slavery, redeem them with power, and take them as his people. He assures them that he will give them the land he promised. Moses conveys this message to the Israelites, but they do not listen due to their discouragement and suffering. God again instructs Moses to speak to Pharaoh. Moses hesitates, expressing his inadequacy. The chapter also includes a genealogy establishing Moses and Aaron's lineage, affirming their role in God's plan. This chapter emphasizes that God's promises are rooted in his identity, not in human response. When God says, I am the Lord, he is anchoring everything in his unchanging nature. The repeated I will statement shows that salvation is God's work from beginning to end. The inability of the people to listen reveal how suffering can dull spiritual sensitivity. Pain can make promises seem distant. Yet, God does not withdraw his word because of human weakness. The genealogy reminds us that God works through history and generation. Moses' continued hesitation shows the transformation is a process, not an instant change. This chapter teaches that God's faithfulness is not dependent on human strength. Today, many struggle to hold on to God's promises when life becomes overwhelming. Discouragement can make it difficult to believe when the truth is clear. But like the Israelites, people may stop listening because of emotional exhaustion. However, God's promises remain true regardless of our feeling. This chapter reminds us to anchor our faith in who God is and not in what we see. Even when we feel inadequate, God continues to call us and use us. Our weakness does not cancel His plan. God's timing may seem slow, but it is always purposeful. God's promises stand firm, even when our hearts feel weak. Points to ponder. Am I delaying obedience because of fear and excuses, even after God has made His will clear? When obedience brings difficulty instead of immediate results, do I still trust God's process? May God bless you all. Amen.